Hey gang, Ross Brand here for LivestreamUniverse.com. This is the season premiere of Season 6 of Livestream Stars. Thank you so much for joining us. We're having a little bit of an audio and video issue behind the scenes, so definitely let me know in the chat if you're hearing this okay. Are you hearing an echo? Does everything sound all right? Hey Tish, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Mike Murphy. I will give him a proper introduction in just a second, but I want to make sure that everything's working okay. It did not pick up my external webcam, so I'm just using the built-in today, and I am using the microphone and just trying to figure out if this thing is echoing. Brad Friedman says it's okay with him. Hey, Brad, thanks a lot for joining us. And guys, thanks everybody for joining us. Livestream Stars has been off since mid to late May, and so it's great to be back after a couple of months. It's great to see everybody. Please do share this out. Let people know that we're back on. Livestream Stars is the show where we feature talented broadcasters delivering high-quality content across live stream platforms, and it's presented by Livestream Universe. Check it out, livestreamuniverse.com. We also have a new resources page up on Livestream Universe, livestreamuniverse.com/resources. You can check out gear and software and other tools for your broadcast. Hey, B. Smith, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. And our guest tonight is Mike Murphy. Mike is one of my favorite people that I've met since I started live streaming. Somebody who kind of sneaks up on you. He does a podcast. He creates some tutorials online. He creates other kinds of content. And when you put it together and you talk to him over time, you realize how smart and strategic and talented he is at all different aspects of business and podcasting and content creation. And he's the host of the Mike Murphy Unplugged podcast. He helps people solve problems with their content creation, find the right tools, and is just an exceptionally creative and great guy. And it's an honor to have you on the show, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Ross, it's an honor to be here. That's a pretty big introduction there, but I appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here. I really am. And it's been an honor getting to know you. So
awesome. So welcome, Mike. I got to say, the first thing that stands out is anybody who checks out your Instagram, and I guess you put them on your YouTube channel as well, but I see them on Instagram, and that is these 2-minute tutorials that you do. And each day it seems like you have a new one, and they cover some app or they cover some technical issue that you might have with your iPhone or your or Adobe if you use that, Photoshop, whatever it is. How did you get started doing that? And I mean, it's just so well produced. I don't think anybody does that better in such a short form, to have it so well produced and offer value within that hard time limit of 2 minutes.
Well, I appreciate it. They started at 60 seconds or less. It was always
right.
60 seconds. I didn't have the multi-photo for a while. I was actually struggling with that. For whatever reason, Instagram didn't get me that update where I had the multi-photo. So I had to limit everything to a minute. And it was definitely a challenge. I think it actually helped me become a better teacher when I had to stick to that minute, because I really wanted to make sure that I finished a complete tutorial in that 60 seconds. Then as soon as I got the multi-photo, I started stretching it a little bit more. So I felt like I was going a little too fast for a while there. But I've always been the person who people have come to for like short answers. Like, hey, Mike, how do I do this with my iPhone? How do I do this? Like really not in-depth type things. So that's always been natural for me to answer these kind of quick questions. And I've taken tutorials for as long as I can remember. So I love teaching. Like I love sharing that knowledge that I have of all this random bit of technology, and the tutorials make sense for me. So
if you don't mind me asking, how long does it take to put one of those together? What's involved? Because a lot of us are live streamers, right? And we do a little bit of video production, but overall, what's involved? I mean, there's music, there's graphic design, there's obviously the script, there's video production. There's probably other things I'm not thinking of, the rights to the music or whatever. Like, talk about the process and how you put that all together and what your workflow's like.
Well, I did a podcast recently answering that question because a lot of people would say, hey, what tool do you use to make those? And the fact of the matter is it's like a whole hodgepodge of things that I just sort of jump from one to the other. There's some things that don't work so well on my computer that I struggle with. I end up using another program to fix that problem. And fortunately, I play with a lot of different programs, so it's not a big deal for me to jump from one program to the next. But I do a lot of my stuff. The daily tutorials don't take me all that long, to be honest with you. I've kind of gotten a pattern of just sort of, I don't write a script for those. I sort of do a lot of those of just things that I know how to do. And I always try to do things that I think people are doing online. So like, that's always my number one thing. Like I always try to say like, these are the things that probably everybody deals with every day, like whether they're creating audio, video, or, podcasting. So I try to stick to these things that I know are going to be like helpful to somebody, you know what I mean? Like, so, and relevant to what a lot of people are currently doing online. So I try to pick apart these little tips that I know don't have to be too involved. But as far as the process, I mean, it's really, sometimes I use music, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm in front of the camera. Like if I'm not in front of the camera, it's usually because I want to be quick, or I'm doing it later at night where I'm tired, or, like I really sort of make do with what I have a lot of times. Like if I have time, I'll put more effort into a tutorial where I, like to be in front of the camera. When I'm in front of the camera, it's harder for me. It's a lot slower. Like it takes me a lot longer. So, I don't do as well when I'm, speaking in front of the camera. So if I want to be quick, I'm probably not in front of the camera.
Right.
And then, so I mean, really, I do like a screencast. I often will do like a webcam screencast. And then I build a lot of stuff in ScreenFlow. I use ScreenFlow for some, and I use Camtasia for some, because Camtasia crashes when I use my iPhone. ScreenFlow works better for the webcam. So like I sort of have these like workarounds for a lot of things that, I've sort of figured out what works and what doesn't, and I just will jump from one to the other. But I do a lot of the editing of those quick ones in Camtasia because it's really fast for me. When I'm doing like a real big tutorial, I'm in Premiere and After Effects primarily.
Right.
Those are like the big guns. But when the quick daily ones, they're mostly in Camtasia, ScreenFlow.
And that's right there. That shows the value that you bring to people, because you're using so many different, like most people have a favorite, right? Like they use iMovie, or they use Final Cut Pro, or they use the Adobe Creative Suite. Or, they're more into screencasting. They use a ScreenFlow or Camtasia. You're like running through them all, right? And
I wish I didn't have to. But I wish I didn't have to, but I do.
But that helps. That helps you solve problems, right, for people, because no matter what their budget is or what their resources they have in their toolbox, you're able to come up with a suggestion of what that tool could do to solve a problem that they're having, because you're familiar with it. And Samantha mentioned, what's your Instagram? I apologize, I didn't mention it when we were talking before. It's at Mike Unplugged. That's also the Twitter handle as well. And it's the name of your podcast. Yep. It's a great podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes, Mike Unplugged. And speaking of podcasts, you're up to 99 episodes. So the episode coming out this week will be episode 100. Congratulations. And is there something you have special planned, something you can talk about? Give us a little sneak preview of what you're doing for episode number 100.
It's not going to be like over the top grand. I'm pretty low key about a lot of things. I mean, I want it to be special. Like, I think it's just going to be a little bit different. I think it's like most of my tutorial or most of my podcasts are like a lesson. Like I try to take one sort of thing and deep dive into it, like something related to content creation. Like I really am doing everything basically as I'm building an online business, online everything. Like I'm trying to take the things that I'm doing that I think are, common for a lot of people who are listening. And I take that one sort of lesson or something that I'm inundated with at the current time and try to make a whole podcast about that. So the episode 100, I'm going to do it a little bit different, do it a little bit more like a reflection, or, kind of like stuff that I picked up over the 100 episodes, or, kind of more of a behind the scenes of, what the 100 episodes have brought me, or, like what I've sort of gone through, or, just a little bit more like a looking back type thing. And, maybe what I'm going to be doing from here on out. So, I'm proud of that, but it's I don't know what to do other than just kind of make it a little bit different than my normal episodes.
Wow. So is that 100 episodes in 100 weeks? Did you take any time off? What's your schedule like as far as getting them out there? I know you're pretty consistent, at least of late. So you stay on that schedule pretty tight.
Consistency and reliability are kind of the two things that like are really, I've been that way my whole life. So like if I sort of commit to something, like I've never missed a week. I've never missed a day. I've created content every day since I've started my podcast, which is, just something that keeps me going. Like I sort of said when I started my podcast, I was just going to try to create daily content, and I've maintained that for almost 2 years now. And I'm really big in consistency. I'm big in like kind of just, sometimes it's tough for sure, but I haven't missed a week in my podcast. Every Friday it comes out, and it's awesome. Not always been easy, I mean, like there's weeks where it's like, oh man, I would love a week off, but I committed to it, and so I show up.
Welcome, Marnie. Welcome. Sabrina Cadini is here. Welcome, Sabrina. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome, Anthony. Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us as well. Please do share this out. Let people know Livestream Stars is back on. We have a great guest tonight, Mike Murphy from the Mike Unplugged podcast, and also check out his Twitter and Instagram accounts at Mike Unplugged. And the website is mikemurphy.co. And he's got a great resources page there. If you're looking for gear, you're looking for stock photos, you're looking for help for your videos, anything you need, I'm pretty sure he's got on that resources page. Welcome, Don Murphy, as well. So when you look, Mike, at the challenges that people are having with content creation, with technology, things like that, what are the themes that keep coming up, or where do you see like a lot of people are struggling right now?
I think people struggle with time. I think time's a big issue. I think there's a lot of things that people want to do, and they often, you get overwhelmed. I mean, I get there as well. Like there's a million things that I want to get done. I create so much, but it's still like there's so many things that are on my to-do list that I just can't seem to get to. And I think a lot of people have that sort of sense of like, what do I do next, or what am I supposed to create? Because there's so many, there's so many different like things that people are sort of told that they're supposed to do podcasts, supposed to do videos, supposed to do blogs, supposed to do this. And I think a lot of people get stuck in this, like, I don't really know which one I'm supposed to do. I think there's like an overwhelm that goes on, less than like the technical side of things, I mean, I teach a lot of the technical, but I think a lot of the things I end up doing to a lot of people or helping people is that sort of, move forward, like push, keep going. Like it's tough. Just keep trying something. Like I'm a big believer that you have to just, like, I didn't know where I was going when I started the podcast day one. Like I knew I wanted to talk about certain topics. But rather than just sort of like try to figure it out, I know that the only way you're going to actually make any progress is to just keep making things. And that's what I've been doing since. Like I'm still working on like, where am I going with everything? But I can tell you from where I started to now, it's getting a lot easier, and it's taken a lot of time, like it's taken time, but I think that's the way to go if you're not sure.
Yeah. So. Well, that's pretty awesome to reach 100, and congratulations, and look forward to the podcast. Again, tell everybody where they can find it. I know it's on iTunes, and it's on your blog at MikeMurphy.co. What can people do if they want to get a hold of your podcast?
You can go to mikemurphy.co/iTunes. We'll bring you right there. And then, yeah, that's probably the easiest way. You can search in iTunes. I'm actually showing up in search.
Nice.
Not always. iTunes doesn't have the best search engine. Maybe they're getting better with the new, but I seem to show up in that. And yeah, so it should be there. All 99 episodes. I don't know if I'm going to turn the corner, and I might have to look at some numbers. I have a feeling one of the things that I checked was 100 was my limit. So I have to make sure I check that to make sure they're all showing up. I know in like on the back of your blog, I think there's a limit. I might have like 99. I have to check those numbers.
Right.
The problem.
Professor is here. Peter Nez is here. Welcome, Peter. Peter is going to be the guest on Livestream Stars next week. So do come back. We're going to talk about LinkedIn video, careers, and a whole bunch of great topics, as well as Peter's approach to live streaming. He's been fantastic since taking over. Just taking over. I mean, the guy just burst on the scene and has been doing show after show and creating content and videos. So can't wait to talk to Peter next week, Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on Livestream Stars. Tish says podcasts are awesome, that she loves them. I like them too. And I was doing a podcast for a little while with when I was doing daily updates, and then I would convert it into a podcast. And I think I want to get back to doing a podcast, and I'm trying to decide whether I should do something short form and original that's just in audio quality, or whether people would like it if I took the audio from interviews like this and made it into a podcast. Obviously, if I do that, it fits great with the blog post for the video as well, and I can create the RSS right through Blueberry plugin on the blog. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that. I'm sure other live streamers think about that too. Should their live stream content be made into a podcast, or should they come up with something audio only or exclusive for a podcast?
I mean, I look at it for a matter of time, and your content is what your podcast is probably going to be anyways. Like, right. I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel if you have the content done. Like, if it makes sense for it, I think it works for a lot of people. I think it would work in your case to repurpose it. I've always been a big proponent of repurposing stuff. I haven't always been good at it. I need to be a lot better than I am. But for your sake, I mean, it seemed like a natural fit for you.
Right. And would you recommend going back and pulling out some interviews from the past if it's covers some evergreen topics, or would you say just start like today will be episode 1 and just go forward with it?
I mean, it sort of depends. Like, I sort of look at like, all right, is it going to be easier for me to do that? Like, I'm definitely a moving forward type person. Like, right. I have so much content in the back that I wish somebody would just pull out and let me, like, I wish I could take the time and just go back like I should. But if you have the time to do it, or if you think it would make sense, then do it. Otherwise, I look at everything like, what's going to be the least amount of like what's not going to stop me from doing it? You know what I mean? Like if it's going to prevent you, if you're going to hold off because it's going to take too much effort, then just do it moving forward. But that's a personal call for sure, but I would definitely not delay it. Right.
Get started now. Anthony makes a great point about distributing to all the audio platforms or other audio platforms. Like, people just think podcast iTunes, right? Podcast equals but there's other audio platforms that are popular and have reach. And like Anthony mentioned, SoundCloud he listens to if he's driving. But there's Stitcher, there's Spreaker, there's Google Play, there's a lot of different I forget, TuneIn Radio. There's something else. I don't even remember all the different ones that I put it on.
I mean, fortunately, a lot of them, if you're using Blueberry or if you're using Libsyn, you can automatically have that, distribute out. So there's a lot of platforms that my podcast goes to that I honestly forgot about. Like TuneIn is one of them.
TuneIn is what I was thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, like you never know, really. Google Play, the last time I checked Google Play, I think I had one play. That was like a while ago, but it's there. A lot of people put in their stuff on YouTube. I didn't really like doing that. I tried that for a few episodes. Putting that. I'm not really big on putting the audio with like a video thumbnail.
Right.
But like people go to YouTube to listen. Like I actually have found myself, listening to YouTube, falling asleep. So, I guess it's not really out of the norm to be on YouTube, and if you're discovered or just for discoverability. And Anchor is another one that sort of came on strong for like a few months ago and went away, and now it came back. And they're, Anchor's kind of allowing people to put their audio up there, and it's more self-created. It's a little bit different, but audio there's a place for it in a lot of these platforms, and you might as well, if it's not a big deal to distribute it, you might as well spread it out, is my thought.
Yeah, Mitch Jackson just joined us. Welcome, Mitch. He recently launched the Mitch Jackson podcast, and he's got a wealth of great interviews that he can pull from, as well as new content that he keeps coming out with. And he says he loves getting the most out of his content by repurposing good stuff, old and new. So that's the approach that Mitch is taking with his podcast. Brad Friedman had a question back in the comments. Let me see if I can find that. He wants to start doing a podcast. What would be the first step to get started?
I tell people there's a couple of things. Like the technical stuff is easy, I think. Like, even though I like the technical stuff, that part is like the things you can sort of figure out, like, rather quickly, I think. I think the biggest thing is you have to really be honest. Like, one, do I have the time, or do I have am I willing to sort of put in the commitment? Because it's a lot more than just plugging in and, turning on the microphone, which is sort of the way that a lot of, articles might read. So like, are you really sort of ready to commit some time? Because it is a lot of time. My podcast is 15 minutes long. I do it by myself, and it still takes me, it consumes my week thinking of the topics, coming up with the topics, doing, and I don't have to, I'm not at the mercy of other people, to interview or whatever. It's just really me, 15 minutes, and it's still a very big time commitment. So I always tell people, are you willing to commit some time? Because it's going to consume you for a while. And then, the next step, I think, is you have to really be honest with the topic. Like, is this something you can talk about? Because after the first 10 topics, you're sort of like, unless you're doing interviews where you really have kind of a nonstop, pool of people to talk to.
Right.
You really have to make sure that you're really into the topic, or else you're going to fade out, I think. I think you really have to be like, I could talk about this for a while,
Well, I think you kind of pull from, Gary Vaynerchuk had talked about, I saw once, was talking about document rather than create. In other words, you document your day. Like, he just has somebody following him. He has D-Rock following him around with a video camera, and out of that becomes that day's story. Well, I think you're going deeper than that. But a lot of what you're doing with your podcast seems to come out of, okay, I need to focus on personal branding, so why don't I teach people a little bit about personal branding, and I'll learn about it too? Or, hey, it's the end of the year and I got to figure out what I'm going to be spending on doing a podcast. So why don't I give people an idea of what it costs to do a podcast, both at a high level, and if you're just getting started and you want a simpler package. So I think, I don't know if that's the way you look at it, but it's sort of like you're talking about where you're at in the process. So unless you're living a life where nothing is happening ever and you have no goals or no challenges, your content seems to come from what's going on in your life. And then I think you do more of the straight document kind of thing, like when you do Instagram stories and things like that, where you just talk about what's going on, what you're feeling, where you're heading. But I think the 15 minutes that you put in the podcast is interesting because you're documenting in the sense of dealing with where you're at, but you're using it to teach too.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, I mean, that analogy is definitely where I didn't know that I was doing it. And I know I actually believe in that document process. So I think it's a really good thing. I didn't know that was what I was doing. I kind of did when I first started, but it's sort of come to play where I really am. It's kind of a selfish help thing, because I knew that I wanted to do something really good I wanted to start a business. I wanted to do this, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And, I'm good in the creative side more than I am in the business side. So I knew I had to figure this all out. And the podcast was like this, not an excuse, but it was really this like platform that I knew that I could create content. And I look at it as like a body of work too. The reason I sort of document it is like, I'm looking at it as this sort of like, this big book that I'm putting together and this big, piece of content that is going to ultimately help people further down the road, so I know that I was going to just share everything I was doing as I'm doing it, and it would help other people and it would help me in the same time. So
each podcast, each piece of content becomes almost like another mini chapter in the autobiography, right? Like in the future, nobody's going to read. Things are going to just read to us, right? You just think about something. Hey, I want to know the answer to that. So anyway, this is, go ahead.
I was going to say that is the goal, to put it all together into a book. I gave myself to the end of the year to come up with the first sort of chunk of book, and the years rapidly dwindling as I made this goal in January, of course, when most people make resolutions, and it's going fast. The window is closing quickly, but that was the goal. Just because I started this podcast with the intention of kind of creating as much evergreen content as I could, while still staying relevant to the time that we're in. Like, that was my goal, to keep it I didn't talk a lot about dates and times. I just try to keep it very current, very relevant, yet not really like time sensitive. So
welcome, Claudia Santiago. Thanks for joining us. Speaking of somebody who's always pushing forward, Claudia creates a tremendous amount of content, and particularly live stream content, hosting shows seemingly almost every day. Great to see you, Claudia. Thanks for joining us. This is Carlos. Oh, Carlos Phoenix is here. Hey, Carlos. Good to see you as well. Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate. We're back with a new season starting today of Livestream Stars, and we'll be doing 2 shows a week for the next month. So please do join us. Thursday night will be an Ask the Expert show with Melanie from Promotional Rescue. If you have any PR questions, she is definitely somebody to ask. So do join us 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night. And also, since we have Mike here, and he's such a great resource, we were thinking maybe we could turn the rest of the show into a little bit of, I hate to use this term because everybody uses it, but kind of ask me anything kind of thing, right? If there's anybody who can answer questions from across the spectrum of content and tech and video and audio and business, Mike is a great resource. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or even better, we'd love it if you jumped into the lobby and came on and asked your question on camera, where you can then ask a follow-up, or Mike can ask you a little more, and you can maybe come away with something, a new tool you can use, or a new idea for your content creation. So we'd love to get your questions in the time we have left. Anthony asks, this is interesting. Anthony asked, talk to us about your studio room, and you see almost no live streamers and very few podcasters, when you see video, have a place that's treated for sound, and you've got one.
And it's also really hot. So if I look like I'm hot, it's because my air conditioner is right here. I'm in Florida, for everybody, so I have to keep it down on this. It's not everybody thinks it's fancy, but it's actually not fancy at all. But this is like just sound treated panels that I got on Amazon, and it's only covers right behind me, basically. And it made a big difference. I live in a really old cottage with hardwood floors, and so it's really boomy. And this was sort of my solution. and it looks fancy, or it looks like I'm in a big treated audio room, and it's not quite as elaborate, I guess, as it might seem. But and then I have microphone, mixer, and I keep things fairly streamlined or fairly simple in my process. I have a lot of gear, more than I need. Yes, I'm overheating for sure, and but yeah. So basically, it's in my bedroom studio is my studio, and it works. It's in the corner. I've got everything I need, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and it only really matters the part that the camera picks up. So as far as anybody knows, you are in the Mike Murphy headquarters radio studio.
And that's the thing. When I'm doing tutorials or shooting stuff, I have to I can't point it that way because you'll get my bed. And
when I worked for a financial news radio station when I was starting out, and they used to say, coming to you live from high atop the Omniplex in downtown. And so when I went there for an interview, I was looking for the Omniplex, and the radio station was in a basement. So with audio, you can completely create the illusion. But clearly what you have showing on video is it's pretty cool setup. You got a great microphone as well. Tell us about your microphone.
I use the Shure SM7B microphone. Love this microphone. I really do. It's flat. It's like kind of, it's not fancy, or, the sound is very flat for a lot of people, but I actually love it. And I speak into a Allen & Heath Z10 mixer. I got a mixer. I had a Scarlett, a Focusrite Scarlett interface when I first started, and I was determined that I needed a mixer. And I was like, I didn't really know, and I was like, I have to have a mixer. I didn't really need a mixer, and but it works. They both work good. I'd probably go back to the Focusrite, to be honest with you, if I was setting up another studio. I just like the simplicity of it, and I don't do interviews. So the mixer was sort of an overkill type situation, but yeah. So I speak this. Goes into a cloud lifter. If anyone's familiar with the cloud lifter, it's kind of a booster, because this guy's like a really big. It's a gain-hungry mic is what it's called, so it requires a lot of power. And so, yeah, so this goes into the cloud lifter. The cloud lifter then goes into the mixer, and I use Sony MDR 7506. They're kind of like the, very popular with podcasters, I guess, good set of microphones. And then, oh man, the lights and overheating.
Yeah, Professor Naz has a question about how you handle it, or you just deal with it.
I only have to do it for this, yeah. I've had an issue today with electricity, and we were out of power all day today. And then it's a long story, but yeah, so I can't run this air conditioner, so I have to deal with it tonight. But overheating generally is a common thing in Florida. A common thing. That just comes with the territory.
So,
summer.
I just plug in with USB into my computer. I've used mixers when I worked in radio. What would you recommend for somebody who wants to get either better audio quality, use an XLR, use a mic that's only XLR, and maybe they are doing interviews or they do need to bring in sound from multiple places? Would you say get the audio interface, get the mixer, get both, get neither? What would you recommend being like the ideal setup for somebody who wants to have multiple voices on a podcast or live stream?
Yeah, I mean, in the mixers, oftentimes you have to sort of do your homework on the mix minuses, and I don't do the mix minuses enough to really feel like I'm super well versed in it. I know a lot about mix minuses because I study everything, and I don't learn anything really in depth until I have to do it a lot. That's kind of the way I do everything. I sort of get my handle on I sort of know where a lot of things are, and then when I need to learn it, I kind of deep dive. But when you're doing a lot of guests and stuff, oftentimes the mixer comes to be pretty handy, because you can do the aux outs. What it is, you basically need to make sure you don't have sound going in and back at the same time. There are a lot of audio interfaces, like the Focusrites. I'm a big fan of the Focusrite, like the Scarlett, those red ones. But you have to get like from the 6i6 up in order to get like the mix minus sort of capabilities. And they're a little confusing. The software that comes with those, at least the older ones, are a little bit on the confusing side. So you have to sort of do your homework, like ask people, like, we'll just do a mix minus. Is it easy? And then in terms of the microphone, the USB, like that microphone you have is a great microphone. It's $50 or whatever, and it's a surprisingly good microphone, and you can do both with that. I think what you plug into is almost more important. The preamp or the interface that you're plugging into will actually make a big deal, a big difference for a lot of people. You don't want to get a super cheap mixer, super cheap preamp. It'll just, it won't perform.
Yeah, you see a lot of people get like the most expensive mic they can afford, and then they plug it into a $70 mixer.
Like the $50 Behringers are not going to power this thing. This would do it with the Cloud Lifter, but it wouldn't be very clean. You don't want. You have to just. It's all about balance. You have to. You have to sort of. It all matters. Like the gear, you don't focus on the gear, but the gear does make a difference. I mean, there is things you have to consider when you get into podcasting. I think a lot of people kind of jump into it and then end up backtracking and fixing things.
Yeah, and I mean, you can start, like you said, you can start with a $50 microphone that's a decent. That's really like, for me, I love this microphone. But if I were to say spend $300-400 more, I'm not going to sound $300 or $400 better if I have the same setup or just throw a cheap mixer and then go in by USB and that's all I've got. So if I get spend $400 or $500 on a mic, I need to spend something similar on an audio interface or more on an audio interface to even start to get the most out of that mic, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that come into play. Like you have to know how to use the mic. That's a big deal. Like a lot of people don't know that it matters how to use the mic or how to talk into it. Like that matters. And it depends what you're using it for. If you're creating a podcast or a live stream, like that microphone you have, like you won't need a $300 mic to sound good on a live stream or brought over the internet type thing.
Right.
You have to sort of figure out, okay, what am I trying to accomplish with this gear? And then, but if you buy a $50 setup and that's it, you have to sort of, there's some common sense to me that says like, I'm not going to have the same sound as someone who has, a NPR studio. Like you have to have a little bit of common sense with that. Right.
But it's knowing how to use the gear that you have as well. And then as you feel you need the next step, you'll know. And that's when
Sure.
For instance, when I got an interview mic, like a handheld, that I bought, like the difference in price wasn't that great between the, say, standard, average, middle of the road and the one that's like the industry standard. So obviously I'm going to pay the extra money and get the industry standard so I don't have noise when I'm moving the mic back and forth, so it picks up from both sides if I forget to put it to the person who's speaking. But I mean, I can't make this sound better just because I get a more expensive mic. Like it's not going to sound that much better broadcasting from into a laptop. I mean, it is what it is, right?
And if it sounds good, it sounds good. Like that's another thing that a lot of people do, especially like with audio editing. I know when I first started editing the podcast, I would spend all this time editing because I wanted it to be sounded good, but it sounded good to me. And then, you sort of had this thing like, well, if I'm not doing it all, then I'm probably missing out. Well, if it sounds good, that's good enough sometimes, like there's sort of that. I think some people overthink a lot of that stuff when it comes to the audio. Like if your microphone sounds good, and it does, then like there's no reason to upgrade.
Yeah. Hey, Coach Jenny, welcome, Jay Garrett. Jay, thanks for the nice compliment, and Professor Nez, thank you as well. No, I would not say that my voice is that good, but I appreciate the compliment. So moving from like podcasting and video, you also do, as pretty much anybody who has a live stream or a podcast, you're going to have a blog that goes with it, right? And with the blog and with the content you create comes social media. How much time, effort, strategy do you put into distributing your content and getting it out there, either on Twitter or through Facebook groups or anywhere else?
Well, I can tell you, I'm not nearly as good as you are. You have been. I mean, truly, I've been like, holy cow, this is how you promote something. I really have been impressed watching you.
Oh, thank you.
I stink at it. Yeah, I'm terrible. In terms of, I'm terrible at self promotion. I always have been. I sort of make stuff, and I don't. That's sort of my biggest weakness. I'll be completely honest with you. Is getting my stuff seen. Is not something that it's something that bugs me because I work hard at making stuff, but yet I do all the sort of necessary stuff, but I don't do all that I can for sure. And I know a lot about it. I just don't follow through with a lot of the social, like the oversharing, not oversharing, but like I could do a lot more, I guess, is what I'm aware of it for sure. And watching you sort of promote this and promote everything, I was like, wow, it's impressive because it works, like I know it works, and I could do a lot better than that. But I do put my stuff out there. Like I do make sure that I have, on all the kind of major platforms. My blog has sort of been like over on Medium, and I'm kind of bringing it back to my website. That's sort of a project that I'm working on. It was sort of something I wish I didn't do. I use my sort of podcast show notes as my actual blog, like the content. But I put a lot of stuff on Medium, and then Instagram has always been sort of my focus because I have more of a creative side. I like the visual of things. So I started out, it was all photography and stuff like that. I enjoy Instagram by far the most. Right. I like everything about Instagram, so I spend the most time there for sure.
Well, you own Instagram with your tutorials. It's amazing. When you look at welcome, Barb Tomlin. Thanks for joining us. Michael Ray had a question about what you use to broadcast. You kind of went through that, but if you want to run through it real quick, kind of real quick again for people who are just joining us, what your setup is.
Shure SM7B microphone into a cloud lifter that boosts it, into a mixer by Allen and Heath, and Sony headphones, MDR 7506. I say that like everyone knows it, but the standard seems to be the ones that a lot of people use. Oh, and I'm using the Logitech C920 webcam.
Cool.
As an FYI, I upgraded what I thought was an upgrade to the C930. I know there's a lot of live streamers out there, and I think the quality was better, but it sort of shifted on me a lot. So I went back to the C920. I've been getting a lot more consistent. So
was the 930 the one with 4K?
It doesn't have 4K, but it seemed to be made for Macs, and it seemed to have a little bit of it was more expensive. And I have to say, like, I really struggled with it. And even though it felt good right out of the box, as my C920 kind of warms up, I seem to get a better picture throughout. Like it stays more consistent. So if that helps anybody, the C930 for me didn't pan out.
Yeah. I'm using the C922 that I got, I don't know, maybe back in like February or March, but not using it today because for whatever reason, sometimes apps like this don't pick it up. So it's actually the first time, I guess, since I started using it where I've done a show and I've been on just your basic built-in, which is still fine. Like if you're just getting started live streaming, it's fine to use your built-in. After a while, you try out an external. I had no idea what a jump it is using an external, like a Logitech webcam. I thought, well, that's for people, if you don't have a decent webcam in your computer. Well, you probably don't now that I've seen what a good webcam is. And so I do like the fact that it gives like a little more depth of field. I'm not just like up like this like I am today when I'm going through, but you can see the background and stuff like that. But anyway, but like I say, you can certainly do a show with a built-in, and yeah, people have been using the C920, like Barb says, producing better results than the one you mentioned. But I've been really happy with the C920 too, and it's good. It's good. So what you got? You got episode 100 coming up. People who are more interested in finding out about your setup and the gear you use and recommend can go to mikemurphy.co and check out your resources. What else is coming up for you as we head into the end of the summer and the fall? What are you looking to accomplish here in 2017?
Well, I really want to make a few classes. They've been sort of the things I've been really trying to get to. I make so much content, tutorials and stuff, but I haven't been able to really pull everything together. I've made a few classes in the past, but I'm working on a few things that I just want to kind of bundle up some just sort of intensive stuff. Nothing big, nothing really elaborate type things, but I really want to create these like little libraries of useful information for people. It's just, I learn in like short form tutorials, like kind of quick. I'm really about, not quick, but like I want condensed, really like to the point type stuff.
Right.
Almost like cheat sheet type things is the way I look at everything. I know everybody's strapped for time, and I know I am, like when I learn stuff now, I want it to the point.
Right.
So I try to create these. So I have all these things in my mind that I think are going to be helpful for people. And I'm just trying to pull it all together. So that's a real focus or a priority of mine, is to put some of these sort of classes together, really short order classes, and around all the stuff that I already teach, but just a little bit more cohesive. And just on the note, when you were mentioning my stuff, if anyone has, I'm really open to, like, questions and stuff. So if people want to reach out to me on Instagram or on my website, contact, whatever, like I love answering questions. So by all means, it doesn't matter if it's about gear. I love the Adobe suite, so anything related to that stuff, I love talking about it. So questions I'm always open for them.
Yeah, actually, Anthony had a question earlier, and gang, if you still have some questions to ask Mike, we've still got some time left, so please do throw those into the chat. Anthony had asked earlier what you use or where you do your editing for audio.
I use Adobe Audition. I had touched on it before I started my podcast, but I didn't really know audio. I've been an audio kind of person my whole life, but I didn't, I kind of played around with GarageBand and stuff like that, but I didn't really edit audio. I really had to kind of learn all the words and everything made, like I knew everything, or, I was familiar with compression and all that stuff, but I didn't really know how to edit audio. Until I started my podcast, and I started just using Audition, and I'm a fan for sure. I think it's really easy. I think even beginners can pick up on Audition. There's not a ton to it. It looks kind of complicated at first, but and I keep things really fast. Like I'm really simple when it comes to editing and stuff like that. Like I do not spend a lot of time in the editing phase.
Right.
I'm also my show is solo, so I have a lot of control over my podcast. Like when I'm done recording, like there's not a lot of editing that needs to be done at that point. Like I go through it, but it's pretty quick process for sure.
Right. Do you have a favorite show from among the 99?
That's funny you asked that. That was part of my upcoming 100 show.
Oh, okay.
There's a few that come to mind. One of my favorite shows. I did a show on Adobe Audition actually that I thought was kind of cool. The head of Adobe reached out to me, which blew my mind. Yeah, not the head of Adobe, the head of Audition. I was like, I remember that show because it was like so cool to me to have this guy to be like, oh, the Audition team, listen to your podcast. I was like, oh my god.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah, but I liked the show to begin. I kind of liked it because I was like learning about it, and then when they did that, it made it a favorite, I guess, because of that, probably that moment. So that was kind of cool.
Right. Now, it's pretty cool that you've had like somebody from Adobe Audition reach out to you, or the head of Audition reach out to you. Do you find that in like getting business, you get business more from like word of mouth, or have you had people come to you and want to work with you because they heard your podcast or they saw a tutorial on Instagram or something like that?
Well, the phone is not ringing off the hook for right now. I mean, I'm not batting people away.
I set you up with a softball and you bunted it.
I'm just kidding. No, I would say I get the most sort of like questions and like people sort of asking about it is through the podcast. Like they heard something and they they need help with gear. Or they need help with, I do a lot of like sort of helper consulting type things through the podcast for sure. And locally I get a lot of people, I do a lot of my work actually locally with people who are familiar with it and just know that I'm in the tech space, and that
Right.
Basically a lot of the local businesses that are trying to get an online presence know that's what I end up talking about. So they want help with that.
So what content do you consume? That's, obviously spend a lot of time creating content, but is there anybody that you look to as somebody who's doing it right? Or, wow, I got to watch that person. I can't miss what they're creating, whether it's a podcast, it's a blog, it's books, it's, whatever content that they're producing and they do well. Is there somebody that you look to as, wow, that person is how you do it?
I can tell you that I've been consuming less and less content the more I've been, kind of involved with everything. Like I used to be a really big content consumer. I took tons of tutorials. Lynda.com was like, I took every night, and I listened to a lot of podcasts all the time. I've been less and less and less. But, you had mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, who I started following like way back when. Like I don't follow his stuff to the point where I just think he's actually on the right track of personal branding, right, content creation. I didn't know it, to be honest with you, but we were having this parallel path, and I was like, the more I sort of watched him, the more I'm like, it's actually what I'm doing, I've learned a lot from his sort of approach because I think it's sort of practical. So yeah, I do find value in his stuff for sure. But I'm on this path. I kind of don't listen to a lot of things. I really am on this sort of train of just figuring things out. So I really try hard not to be influenced by people. Like when I first started, I was teaching about podcasting. So I stopped listening to any podcast that had anything to do with podcasting because I did not want to be influenced. So that's sort of, it's kind of strange. I don't want to hear anyone else's take on the stuff that I'm doing because I don't want to be, it sounds kind of weird, but I want to learn and be inspired, but I also I don't want to be I don't want to be affected by it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you like doing what you're doing and you're happy with the results. So it's kind of like, why not find what's inside of you to do rather than kind of paint by numbers and do what the expert says you're supposed to do.
I mean, I'm really I really looked at people who are doing good things. I like seeing people who are doing great things for sure. I have my head down on a lot of things, to be honest with you, and I just go, so there's no time.
Yeah, Barb says doesn't sound weird at all. You got to be you. Claudia says, yeah, I do that with sometimes just create, your own sound. And of course, when Claudia mentions sound, she's a musician, singer. So that's a big part of it. Listen, this is awesome having you on, guys. If you would like us to do this kind of, not necessarily another live stream stars, but do something where we get on from time to time and just take questions about whatever is going on with your content creation, or you need help with something. Mike's such a tremendous resource. Is something maybe we could do, a couple times a month or whatever. If that's something that you'd be interested in, do let us know in the comments, and we'll come back and do this again another night and take questions and definitely bring more people on and interact with you and kind of see what's going on with your content and how we can help you take it to the next level. And do come back Thursday night. We do have Melanie from Promotional Rescue. Always makes me think of the Rolling Stones song Emotional Rescue. I'm sure that's why she chose it.
I love that name.
Yeah, so she's a great at PR, and also has been an actor and is a fascinating personal story. So do join us Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern for Ask the Expert. And Mike, thanks again for coming on. It's MikeMurphy.co. CO is the website. At Mike Unplugged on Twitter and Instagram. The podcast is Mike Unplugged. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Russ.